There are seasons when fear creeps in quietly, not with shouts, but with whispers. The what ifs, the what knows, the sense that the ground beneath your feet might give way at any moment. You look around for answers, and everything feels blurry. In those moments, it's easy to believe fear is the only voice worth listening to. But it's not. There is another voice, quieter, deeper, steadier. It says, I am with you. Faith doesn't always start with confidence. Sometimes it begins in the middle of trembling. It's not the absence of fear, it's choosing not to be ruled by it. Throughout Scripture, we're told, do not be afraid. Not because fear isn't real, but because God is greater than what you fear. That truth doesn't erase the unknown, but it redefines how you walk through it. Fear focuses on what you can't control. Faith focuses on who never loses control. And when you walk with God, your steps may feel uncertain, but His guidance never is. The path might be dark, the road ahead might not be clear, but the one leading you sees it all. And He's not rushing, He's walking with you, one steady step at a time. It's easy to feel like faith is something you need to muster up, but real faith isn't something you manufacture, it's something you receive. It comes from knowing who God is, not how strong you feel. That's why even a mustard seed of faith can move mountains, because it's not about the size of your belief, but the size of the one you believe in. Faith begins when you decide to believe God's character over your circumstances, when you choose to see uncertainty not as a threat, but as an invitation, to trust deeper, to listen closer, to walk slower. Fear shouts for control. Faith releases it. One binds, the other frees. And it's in that space between what you can't predict and what you believe anyway that faith truly grows. In uncertain seasons, the temptation is always to reach for something solid, a plan, a solution, a guarantee. But God rarely gives blueprints. He gives presence. He doesn't always say, here's the map. He says, follow me. That's the walk of faith, not clarity, companionship. Abraham didn't know the destination, but he knew the voice. Moses didn't know how the sea would split, but he stepped forward anyway. Over and over, Scripture shows us that faith thrives not in certainty, but in surrender. That kind of faith doesn't need full visibility, just full trust. You might not know what's next, but you know who's next to you, and that changes everything. When you walk with God, the ground doesn't have to feel stable. He is your stability. When the wind picks up and the waves rise, you don't need to calm the storm. You need to remember who sleeps in your boat. Peace doesn't come from control. It comes from closeness. The problem with fear is that it's persuasive. It speaks in your own voice. It uses real memories, real wounds, real worries. And yet, it always leaves out the most important truth. God is still here. That's what faith remembers when fear starts shouting. Not that the threat isn't real, but that God is more real. Psalm 56 says, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Not if, when. Even the faithful get afraid. Even the strongest feel shaky. But faith is the decision to lean in when fear tries to pull you back. Not to deny the storm, but to look for the one walking on it. God doesn't shame you for being afraid. He meets you in it. He walks beside you when your legs feel weak. He reminds you that courage isn't a lack of fear. It's movement through it, with Him. You don't need perfect peace to keep walking. You just need the next step, and He will always give it. This is how you grow unshakable faith, not by being unafraid, but by being anchored, by knowing that your emotions are real, but God's promises are truer. When you walk with Him in the unknown, you find out what's actually holding you together. And it's not your strength, it's His. If this stirred something in you, subscribe and turn on the bell, not just to follow a channel, but to walk a journey of faith, one truth at a time. One of the most powerful things you can do in a season of uncertainty is keep walking, not fast, not perfectly, just faithfully. Fear wants to freeze you, to keep you stuck in analysis, in doubt, in what ifs. But faith says, take the next step. Even when the outcome is unclear, even when your hands are trembling, that's when trust is forged. Scripture never tells us to understand everything. It tells us to trust the one who does. Proverbs says, lean not on your own understanding. That's not easy, especially when everything inside you wants clarity. But what if clarity was never the goal? What if closeness was? God often does His deepest work in the dark, when the path disappears and all you can do is listen for His voice. That's when faith becomes real, not an idea, not a song lyric, a lifeline. And in that place, you begin to learn. The presence of fear doesn't mean the absence of faith. It just means you're human. But faith is the choice to trust what's eternal over what's urgent. Your questions don't scare God. Your hesitation doesn't cancel His promise. He walks with the doubtful. He holds the weary. And He calls the afraid. He doesn't demand that you never waver, only that you don't walk away. This is what faith looks like in real life. Honest, wounded, still moving forward. Faith doesn't grow in ease. It grows in uncertainty. Not when everything is going right, but when nothing makes sense and you still say, I believe. It's in those moments that faith stops being theory and becomes reality. You stop quoting scriptures just to comfort yourself, and you start living them because they're all you have. Isaiah 41 says, do not fear, for I am with you. Notice what God offers as the reason not to be afraid. Not answers, not escape, but presence. He never promises that the waters won't rise. He promises they won't drown you. He never says the fire won't come. He says it won't consume you. That is faith. Trusting not in a painless path, but in a present God. There will be days you question everything. Days when your prayers feel small and your strength feels gone. And yet, even then, you are never walking alone. God doesn't step away when you struggle. He steps closer. He doesn't wait at the finish line. He walks beside you in the fog. So don't confuse silence with absence. Don't mistake stillness for abandonment. The God who led you this far isn't going anywhere. Keep walking, even slowly, even with doubt, even with fear in your pocket. Just don't stop, because every step taken in faith weakens fear's grip and strengthens your soul. Sometimes faith doesn't look bold. It looks quiet. It looks like someone showing up in prayer even when they don't feel heard. It looks like choosing kindness when you're tired. It looks like saying, God, I trust you, while your hands are still shaking. That's the kind of faith that pleases Him. Not loud, not flashy, but real. Fear wants to define your story by the unknown, but faith rewrites it with the unseen. Hebrews says, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. It's not blindness. It's choosing to believe there's more than what your eyes can catch. It's living by truth, not just sight. When Peter stepped out of the boat, the waves didn't stop. The wind didn't calm, but he walked anyway. Not because the storm was over, but because Jesus said, come. That's the walk you're invited into. A faith that obeys before it understands. A faith that believes presence is better than certainty. God is not asking you to be fearless. He's asking you to be faithful, to stay close, to speak His name when everything inside you says run. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear have the final word. Every time you choose Him over your fear, you become more like Him. Faith over fear isn't a one-time choice. It's a rhythm, a return, a daily decision to trust what you can't see more than what screams in front of you. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll barely whisper His name. But both count. Both matter. Because faith isn't measured by your feelings. It's measured by your focus. God isn't waiting for you at the end of your storm. He's already in it, holding the line, whispering, "I'm still here." That's what makes faith so powerful. Not that it fixes everything, but that it anchors you while nothing is fixed. And sometimes, peace doesn't come from the answer. It comes from knowing you're not walking alone. The most courageous thing you can do in uncertain seasons is not figure it all out. It's to stay close to God when you're confused, to stay in His Word when it feels silent, to stay in motion, even if it's just a slow step forward. Faith is not about having no fear. It's about trusting that God's love is stronger than your fear will ever be. So when the next wave of uncertainty rises, you don't need to panic. You've been here before, and God met you here before, and He'll do it again. And now ask yourself this: what if the very fear that's paralyzing you is the doorway God's using to teach you how to walk with Him more deeply?